Many people see data visualization as storytelling, but I disagree because just a graph is not a story. Maybe it can be a story, it can be part of a story, but it's not just a story. You also need a narrative.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. Today we have Gilbert Eijkelenboom. He's the founder of MindSpeak, a training program helping data and analytics professionals improve their business understanding, persuasion, and storytelling skills. He wrote the best-selling book, People Skills for Analytical People. Welcome to the show, Gilbert.
Thanks a lot, Deliana. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Today, we'll talk about his career journey, lessons he learned from poker, and how to tell a compelling story with data. And if you enjoy the show, subscribe to the channel and give me a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. So 10 years ago, you were a professional poker player, optimizing decisions using data and human behaviors. Later, you become a data science consultant at Capgemini. Can you walk us through your career journey? How did you get into data science?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, when I started choosing for a career, I found it very, very difficult because there were a lot of things I enjoyed doing. But what was clear is that I liked the analytical side. Even in high school, my favorite subjects were mathematics and physics. And I enjoyed that mathematical side, but also I enjoyed psychology. But I started my career in technology, in consulting. And what intrigued me was data, because data allows us to calculate the future and kind of predict the future. That's what I loved about data, and especially combining it with psychology, predicting how people would behave. So I did some projects at Cognizant and Capgemini consulting companies to help clients and calculate, what customers are expected to do next in terms of marketing. So what are they likely to buy? How are they likely to behave on the website? And of course, with data, you can predict all of that, or at least do a good estimated guess. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really love doing. And I also noticed in my career in data that very often people did not listen to my insights, listen to the data, even though I thought the data is the truth, right? Mm-hmm. Why are they not listening? But I learned throughout my career, through many challenges, that you need more than data. You need more than the rational facts. You also need to look at the emotional side. How can you persuade other people? How can you communicate the data in terms that is valuable for the business? And that's a big lesson I learned. And it was a big frustration for me as well, because it was difficult. But I also saw that many other data professionals, data scientists, data analysts were struggling with this. They said, we have the data, but the business is not listening, or they're not adopting our recommendations. And that's why on the side of my consulting work, I started giving training sessions. And I really, really enjoyed that because it combines the data field with psychology. Mm-hmm. So I was so glad I found that and I could discover that part, because I also found that I really enjoyed helping people grow and training people. And eventually that all came together, the data world and training in MindSpeak, the company that I founded.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So we'll definitely get into your training and the lesson you learned from communicating with your customers. So when you work at Capgemini, what was your day-to-day like as a consultant?
Yeah, I worked on various projects. So one of the projects, I was a data analyst, so not really a data scientist, but more like an analyst role. And I worked for a bank on an e-commerce team. And in that team, my role was to analyze the data, predicting what people would do next. So kind of predicting what their next behavior would be in order to see what commercial opportunities are, if you can sell different products, or to improve the customer experience. Because if you improve the website or the app of the bank based on what you know from your customers, based on the data, then you can improve the customer experience. So those are some things I did, and I worked together with the business team, so with a lot of marketeers. That also meant that I'm pretty introverted. I enjoy speaking with people, but I also tend to be easily drained with big groups, with long interactions with other people. I also need time for myself. And some of the marketeers or some more salespeople, they had a different personality. So sometimes that was challenging for me to interact with them and to kind of find a good collaboration. But I learned a lot, and this is also where I thought, okay, I really enjoy the data, but also next to my data consulting work, I started giving training, and I enjoyed that so much that I wanted to pursue that path.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that you collaborate with the sales and marketing team. So could you share some specific challenge you had while you're working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one mistake I made is that I was not sharing enough what I was working on. So I was kind of working on stuff, but I didn't share throughout that project. I didn't share enough what I was working on. And that's why the sales and marketing people, they were kind of in the dark, right? They were not sure what I was working on, not sure how I could help them. And me, I have more the attitude like, I only want to say something if it really contributes to the conversation, right? I really had a big threshold for myself. First, I wanted to have a really good point before I opened my mouth. And yeah, some people said, okay, it's good because in regular interactions, there are also a lot of people that talk a lot and that don't really contribute anything, you could say. But on the other hand, if you stay silent all the time and you only make a point if you really have a point, or if you have the last 5% perfectly sharp, then maybe you're too silent. And but also people told me you're very, very hard to read. And even though I'm pretty open in sharing things with others, but it's more on a one-to-one level. And if people ask about it, I'm not really someone that was sharing a lot without other people asking, like proactively sharing stuff I was thinking about. And I think this is important sometimes, and especially in data. If you work in data, you have a lot of knowledge that other people don't have. So it's also your role to educate other people what you're doing and what are the opportunities with data. Because the more you educate the business, the more they understand what is possible, and the more they will reach out to you for help, for projects, or for requests. And yeah, I think many people in data complain a lot that other people lack technical skills or data skills. And maybe it's true, but I believe you can only close the gap if you both work on closing the gap. So not only blaming each other and pointing fingers, but trying to do your best to understand, first of all, that they have a different way of thinking, a different experience. And even though they don't have the data skills, they have a lot of other types of experiences that are also needed in order for data to work, to be valuable. And second, see how you can create that good collaboration instead of just saying, okay, they are not doing their job.
Yeah. That's a great insight. So you played poker. What was the most important skills you learned from poker that helped your career? Especially your understanding from people and psychology?
That's a tough question. I think that there are many things I learned. First of all, how decision-making works for myself and for other people, because playing poker, the only thing I was doing all the time is optimizing my decisions, making decisions, and based on all the data, because I was playing online, often 6 to 8 tables at the same time. So I had a big screen in front of me with all the tables. And of course, you need to understand how people play, right? Are they aggressive? Are they passive? And I had all the data that was automatically collected. So every time someone placed a bet, I could see what type of player that was. So imagine Daliana is playing, and I can click on the icon, and then 100 statistics appeared that told me what type of player she was. And that gave me a lot of information. So I could, based on the data, calculate what the odds and what is the pot size, etc., what would be the next best action. So that's something I learned from it. And also in terms of psychology, because sometimes people get emotional, right? If they lose a very big pot, a very big hand, then the next hand they're more likely to overplay their hand, to be a bit annoyed, aggressive, overly aggressive, even though they don't have a strong hand. So by having these data insights on one hand, the more rational side, and also the psychological insights, you get the complete picture for your decision making. And I think it works the same in data, because we're talking about data a lot, the technology, but in the end, data doesn't do anything. It's only helping people make better decisions, to minimize risk, to optimize revenue, things like that. It's always a business driver coupled. So we need to understand how those people make decisions. That sales director who's using the dashboard, how is he making this decision? What are his or her business problems? And how can your data contribute to that? Because if we don't know that, if we don't have that business understanding, then you're just creating a dashboard that will never be used. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah. And to follow up, how do you understand the business needs? How do you ask questions, or what are some procedures you follow to achieve that?
Yeah, I think it first starts with a kind of business mindset where we understand, if you work as a data scientist, that the only thing that matters is the business impact, right? And of course, it may be fun and cool to do the newest technology and the shiny using the shiny newest tech, but the only thing that matters is business impact. So if you have an Excel sheet that does the same job that you can create in 10 minutes, awesome, right? You don't need an algorithm or fancy stuff. So that's the first mindset I think we need to adopt if you work in data, especially as data scientist. And second, how can you concretely do that? I think the first step is to get closer with the business. So instead of working in isolation, if that's something you do, sit closer with them, go have lunch with them, or have a 15-minute coffee, digital or physical, every week or every few weeks, or visit one of the meetings. And even if you don't understand everything what they're discussing, you get a grasp of what is important to them and what are the topics on their mind. Also, if you get a business request, then it's very important not to jump in the data directly. There's something I have done many times. So I'm very curious. I'm a problem solver. I'm a bit of a engineer in mindset in my head. So if someone presents a problem, I'm immediately thinking, how can I solve this? And I open my laptop and I dive into the details. And this is not good, because first you need to take a step back and understand, hey, what is the business problem? And even before that, I think, so there's a little framework I find very useful. I came up with it. It's not very special, but I think it's very effective. It's the 3 C's. So it starts with connection. And this is something we often skip. So if someone asks, hey, can you create this for me? Or we need this kind of project. Start with connection and validate what the other person is saying. Say, hey, I see it's important for you that to reach this and that. I see this is your goal. So first, the connection between you and the other person. And then curiosity. Ask a lot of questions. What is the goal? Why? What is the purpose of this whole project? Why do they need it? How is it going to contribute to their decision making? And how is it going to change their life in the end? And lastly, clarity. So get clear on how long will it take you, recap all the questions, and make sure you have a proper expectation set as well. Because often, my experience and what I hear a lot is that people in the business, they want the work done yesterday, right? It's always urgent. So it's always also your job to manage those expectations. And it's important to realize that, it's also in their interest to manage those expectations right, instead of being pushed over and not delivering something they want. So connection, clarity, or connection, curiosity, and then clarity. Yeah,
that's a great framework. I think a lot of times we have the curiosity and sometimes, we achieve the clarity, but we miss the connection part. Sometimes we forget to build the relationship with people we work with, and we ask questions, but it sounds like we're interrogate them without the connection, right? So from your work experience or from your training experience, is there any cases when people don't really trust you as an analyst or scientist, and how do you build that connection from there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. To your question, absolutely. And sometimes it has to do with the data. Maybe they trust me, but they don't trust the data.
Mm.
This is also an issue I sometimes see. And sometimes they don't trust you as a person. And I think it has partly something to do with that they're less familiar with you as a person, but also with your job. What the heck are you doing? You know, you're doing this magic and opening R, Python, whatever. And I think this also, I mean, it's normal. If you go abroad and you see people that do things in a different way or they have a different appearance, maybe we feel less familiar than when we see people in our neighborhood. So I think it's important to build that trust, because if people trust you, then you can collaborate, and then they will believe your data and use your data, whether it's a dashboard or algorithm or whatever the data product is. So it's very important to establish the data. And a few things are important in establishing trust. So first of all is credibility. So they need to see you as the person that is the go-to person, right? Or the go-to team, if you look at the team level. So they need to know that you bring results. And one thing how you can do that is champion your work or your team's work more often. So if you have done something with your team, if you have achieved something, then also tell it to a different department. And not to brag, but just to show what are the possibilities, to educate them. So this is credibility. Another one is reliability. So that one is a bit easier, I think, because if you promise something, you need to be on time. You need to be reliant. People should be able to rely on you. The third one is intimacy. So how, to which extent are people willing to share secrets with you, and not per se personal secrets? Might also work, but also about business and their concerns and maybe their goals, what they have in mind or what they need to get a promotion, right? If you know that, if you know what the business director is trying to achieve and maybe have maybe some selfish interest as well, you know he will base his decisions at least partly on that. So there's kind of a formula of trust that I'm talking about now. So it's credibility, it's reliability, and intimacy, and you add those up, and then you have, and below the denominator is self-orientation. So everything is divided by self-orientation. So the more you focus on your own goals instead of showing that you care about the goals of the other person, the less they will trust you. So the more you will show that, hey, I understand you have these business goals, you want to increase revenue. Let's team up to see how we can make that work, instead of only diving in your data and trying to find the solution. They will trust you more and they will collaborate with you more often. So that's a formula for trust. And of course, it's not black and white, right? But it's good to think about these different elements and how they contribute to building trust, yes or no.
Yeah, you made a few great points, especially championing your work. I struggled with that, especially I think a lot of us are introverts. Like you mentioned, it feels like we're bragging ourselves. And I think you're not bragging. You are showcasing your capability to earn trust from people you work with. And the purpose of it is not to show off, but to form a connection, form this trust, so it will make your future collaboration easier. So sometimes what I find helpful is it might be difficult for me to think of what type of work should I talk about or achievement during the meeting. So if I go in the meeting, before I go in the meeting and I know I need to earn trust from them, I'll prepare some related work experience for me to talk about during my introduction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a great point you made. And it's also very interesting you mentioned intimacy. I think that part is also sometimes we don't think about, what does the other person want? Besides the business, everyone has their own career goals or personal goals. Maybe they want this project in a certain way for their promotion. So how do you get to that intimacy level? Especially you mentioned, it could be your director, VP, and while you are a data scientist, how do you get that information?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? And there's also another dynamic at play, namely the other person might be more senior, so you also don't want to disclose everything, or you feel nervous around that person because he or she is more senior. That makes it even more difficult. And I think what it comes down to is to treating someone like a person, right? Mm-hmm. And to get lunch or ask questions, and instead of trying to brag about your own work and try to prove that you're a good worker, instead of that, take an interest in the other person. What is he or she working on? What are their interests, even outside of work? And ask a lot of questions, and not just closed questions, but open questions that make them think. Ideally, questions that they cannot directly answer. Because, of course, you can ask where you're from, what was your previous job, etc. But all those questions are very factual. And the more emotional a question, the more intimacy you will build. So emotional questions, you don't need to ask about the last funeral or whatever, but you can also ask about what was the most important decision in your career. People need to think about that, right? So all these questions you're asking me now, and that I think generally people could podcast hosts ask. I think those are really good questions to ask to people in your work environment as well. So if you struggle with this, maybe it's a good idea to listen to podcasts, and not just what the person is saying, the guest, but also how the host is hosting the podcast, and try to steal some of the questions that Aliana is asking to those senior stakeholders, because those questions will certainly get you closer.
That's a very interesting point. Thanks for sharing that. So you talk about earning trust, building that type of intimacy, but still, when you deliver the project in the end, or you might need more people to join the team, you need more funding, you get pushbacks from stakeholders. So do you have more tips about how to get stakeholders buy-in?
Yeah, sure. It's very common, right, that people push back. They don't believe, or they don't want it. And first of all, it starts with empathy and understanding whatever you're presenting or whatever you're trying them to use is a change for them. And people don't like change in general. We find it very hard to deal with that. So first of all, realize it's nothing personal. It's not against your work or your insights, but it's also normal. People usually push back if they have a change, unless there's a big benefit for them, if it does something for them. And that's something you need to understand. Okay, what are they interested in? What are their goals? Or what are their pains and frustrations? And how can your data solve that? And if they push back, apparently it doesn't really contribute to their goals or pains, or there's an issue. And most important, if you see people push back, is understand what is the issue. What is the reason why they're pushing back? So that's a question you can ask. And generally, asking a question like why, it can be effective, but it can also be triggering a lot of defensiveness. If you ask why, it's you need to justify yourself.
Yeah.
You can also say what makes this or what causes this. Usually that's causes less defensiveness for the other person. But it's most important that you understand what is the reason that they don't like what you're presenting or what you're showing them. And then you get a lot of information about, what's the issue, right? And maybe there's a workaround, but you will never find the solution, the workaround, if you don't know what the workaround should be for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is your experience? How do you deal with such cases if you see stakeholders pushing back?
Yeah, I think it's case by case. So like you mentioned, usually they have a reason. Sometimes it's behind the scenes of the meeting. Maybe they have a reorg. Maybe there's some, politics that you don't know. Maybe they don't have funding themselves, so they have to push back. So what I've learned is exactly like you mentioned, to have empathy. Your goal is to help them solve the problem. And if on their side, they already make the decisions to abandon their project, for sure you're not get funding. And then it doesn't make sense for you to keep pushing for this project to be launched, right? So at that point, you definitely have experienced those things. And then I felt very frustrated, like you mentioned, right? I felt, oh, did I do something wrong? But sometimes it's really not up to me. I think first, like you mentioned, is to understand it's not personal, right? It's not about you. And it can be a lot of factors playing there. And if something doesn't work, so I still try to wrap up the project. Maybe it doesn't go into production, but I can deliver a document for them. Maybe in the future, they want to come back to work with us. And that has happened. Or even if they don't continue with this project, with this write-up, it helps me for my review. It's still something I accomplished. And I think it's important to also think about what are some reusable assets you can get from this project. Maybe it doesn't provide a lot of specific business value, but the model you created, the data pipeline you built, can be also used for your future projects. So try to think about whether you can still get a lot of value from this project, from the time you spend, also the relationship you built. And there are also some other cases where it's not clear whether they want to continue. So I think something you can do is to propose a very small step that doesn't requires a lot of investment from them, to tell them, hey, how about we just do a small experiment? We try on a small percentage of people, or we launch it for a short period of time and let them know there's a very little risk on their side. And if they see a big upside from this small trial, maybe they want to invest more. I think that's how you can get buy-in through those small steps. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I also like that you mentioned that even if it's not, implemented, you can always take lessons or even physical reuse parts of it in a future way. And also about minimizing risk, because in the end, a lot is about risk in business. People are scared to do something because they're not sure if it works. They don't want to look bad. That's also a big thing in the business world. If they'll go implement something and it doesn't work, they're the ones that get the blame, right? Or that get they're made fun about. So you need to understand that if you minimize that risk, I think that's a great point. And another tip I would like to share about getting buy-in is that many data scientists, they like to work by themselves or among other data scientists.
Yeah.
And to create models and be on the laptop for a long time without spending so much time with the business throughout the project phase. And I think it's something we need to do differently. And one thing we can learn is the IKEA effect. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, but the IKEA effect, I don't know if you've bought anything at IKEA.
Yeah, can you explain to our audience?
Yeah, of course. So if you think about the last time you bought some furniture at IKEA, maybe you never bought something, maybe you did, but imagine you did. And then you assembled that table or wardrobe or whatever it is. And then when you're done, you're kind of proud or frustrated, or at least you find some happiness probably when it's finished. Also because you created it partly yourself. And that's the IKEA effect. It says that we overvalue things, products or projects that we're involved in, that we had our say in, that we kind of partly created ourselves. So the lesson here is that if you create a data product, whether it's a new model or whatever you're doing, then throughout that project phase, ask the opinion of stakeholders and make sure they have a say in how it's gonna end, because this will not only give you good insights how you can improve the model, but also the emotional buy-in. People would like to have their say, and then they're also invested in making the solution work and also pitching it or helping getting buy-in with other stakeholders, because usually there are more than one stakeholder, right? And those more senior stakeholders might be very far away from you, but the business stakeholder can do the work for you if you get them involved. So that's how I suggest to use the IKEA effect.
Yeah, that's a great kind of tips on the psychology. And also it makes sense, right? When you get feedback from them, you can adjust the direction of your project. And instead of working on your own, so basically what you propose is to team up with them, although they're not data scientists, but using that feedback. So in the end, when you present the result to them, it's not a surprise. They already know what you're working on and they have given feedback. So it is something they want, especially when you have a big meeting. So I always suggest to review your work with the key stakeholders. If the key stakeholders are busy, review with someone they work closely with. So in the meeting, everybody already on the same side, and people might still disagree and give you some feedback, but it's not going to be, a direction of, oh, this is not something we want.
Yeah, exactly. And I've experienced it many times, that you arrive at the last meeting, but I didn't do the work before. And as a result, in that meeting, it was a big surprise to me that people were not receptive to what I was sharing. But I think if you do the work before, if you talk with them and get feedback, the last meeting is much lighter, as you said.
Yeah, and I think as a data scientist, I also feel like if I have a big meeting, I'm so busy preparing for the meeting, writing the document, preparing for the slides, and examine my methods and data. Sometimes I don't feel I have time to talk to people. So I know it's challenging, but this step is really important. So when you plan your work, allocate 1 or 2 weeks, just finish your work before that, and then just leverage the time to get feedback. So we talked about what to do when we get pushbacks from our business partners or stakeholders. So when they ask for something that is difficult for us to get from data, something impossible to achieve, how do we push back?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it first comes down to having the mindset that they're not dumb, right? So because they might ask really obvious questions about things that are clearly not possible, right? And maybe the question or the words in your head pop up saying, I cannot believe you asked such a question, right? But I think it again comes down to the mindset. Everyone has a different type of experience. Everyone has value, just different kind of. So don't blame the other person, even not. And if it appears in your head, acknowledge it, right? And then you can educate the person and tell, hey, that's not possible. And I suggest you give a brief explanation. If you don't give any explanation at all, it would be strange or seeming like you don't want to take up the work or whatever the reason. And then a lot of questions pop up in the head of the other person. So give a brief explanation, but don't go into depth. Not all the technical details. There's a reason why the person doesn't know it doesn't work. So try to use very simple language and a few sentences, not too much. And if you have that trust, of course, it's much easier because they trust that if you say it's not working, they will not question it and go deeper and go deeper. So that's another reason why building trust is so important. And then, after you can see if there are other ways how you can still help that person. And then it comes down to asking really good question. Okay, what are you're asking this, but what do you actually need? So there's often two different things, right? If they ask for a dashboard or an algorithm or model or whatever, they have a reason why. There's a business problem they want to solve. So understanding that need, the business problem, by asking about the purpose and what they're trying to achieve, you understand their need, and then you can look at, okay, are there any other solutions or ways I can solve this? But again, first you need to go back to the purpose. Why are we having this conversation? And I think that's challenging for many data scientists, because sometimes some people are tempted to say, no, it's not possible, obviously not. Or maybe they don't think it, but it's a kind of attitude sometimes that I sometimes see, and it's not very effective in the collaboration. So have empathy for the person asking. He doesn't know, but he has other values. He brings something else to the table, and then be patient, explain in a few sentences, easy words, and then find the purpose so you can see if there's another solution.
Yeah. I think it's really important whether you want to say yes to a project or you feel you need to say no. I think before that is to understand what they try to achieve, right? Even if you feel it's something you can do, but then you realize, oh, doing this might not solve your problem, then you might still need to have a conversation to see what exactly do you need to do. Maybe you need to do something different, and vice versa, right? Maybe you think it's a no, but going back to their goal, you find out, oh, maybe there's something else you can do to help them achieve those goals. So it become a yes. Going back to the purpose, I think it's always the first thing to check before you start a project or having the conversation with the business.
Exactly. And then you also make sure that you're actually helping them. And if you say it, if you tell them, hey, I really want to help you. I see you want to achieve X. With this solution, it's not possible. But let us see if we can find another solution. And then you can brainstorm, right? You don't need to have the answer right away. And I often felt pressured by business people or by people asking me, because I was tempted to say yes. I wanted to kind of please other people. I wanted to be useful.
Yeah.
But by doing so, by thinking that I need to solve everything, right? By thinking I need to be useful to people, the pressure is on my shoulders. Sometimes I was saying yes and then figuring out later that it didn't work, or giving timelines that were actually not feasible. And I was very stressed out working late to make it work, or I was missing the deadline and no one was happy. So saying no is a big thing, I think, especially this seniority dynamic where data scientists are very often younger and less senior, and also more introverted. And some of the extroverted people can be a bit intimidating or easily perceived as putting pressure. So it's something I found very difficult, but I think is a crucial skill.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Especially as an introvert, I can relate to that. When I started my career, I was the only data scientist in the company, and I interact with a lot of people who are very friendly, very outgoing, and then I just feels like I don't know what to say to them. In the meeting, everybody doing like small talk, like, what do you do over the weekend? What do you watch on TV? It's like nothing. I think for the listeners, if you feel the same way, I think it's okay. You don't have to sound smart in those conversations, and you can just be genuine and share whatever you feel comfortable to share. I think once people get to know you, they know you're trustworthy, is genuine. Doesn't matter the type of communication styles that you have or the lifestyles you have. Who cares, right?
Exactly, and still for people who are introverted, who are not sharing as much in the beginning or upfront, it's still you need to know that it's still okay, to share about your hobbies or your strange things, because it makes you very authentic. And it's totally fine to be a bit more quiet, to be introverted. It's all fine if that's your personality. But don't let it be kind of and not excuse, but kind of trigger to not share anything. I think it's a wonderful way to establish connections. And I think if we don't share anything, then it's very hard for other people to relate to you. And even if they don't like if they're not into the thing you're sharing. So for example, if I'm really into traveling and I'm talking to someone who just wants to be at home, then I can be very passionate about traveling, but that person can really relate to it, but can at least see that I'm passionate about something, right? And it doesn't matter what you're passionate about. If someone else talks to me about the fact that he's passionate about collecting stamps, which I totally cannot relate to, but at least it tells something about the person, it shows the character. So don't be afraid to share those things, because it shows who you are. And you may be quiet and introverted, and that's also fine, and it's also part of your personality. But don't be afraid to share things.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And also, again, sometimes it's hard for us to come up with things to say during a conversation. So if you know those type of conversation, those questions come up pretty often when people ask you, hey, what do you do, when you're not working? Maybe you can prepare a little bit of your story, some adventure you had that you feel proud to share. You can craft your own story. So when you are in those conversations, you feel more at ease.
Yeah, I like that, because I think many people who are introverted they like to think before they speak, right? If you put them on the spot, then it's difficult. And same for me. And actually, I like what you just share about writing things down, because I did the same, and it really helps me to know what I'm gonna say or know how I want to express it. And even now, sometimes I keep kind of a list of all the things that I'm excited about a travel, or about what I'm doing right now. I bought a piano again.
Nice.
Or I borrowed one. I had lessons when I was 12 years old, 2 years. So I'm trying to figure out how it works again, and I'm pretty passionate about it. So it's kind of a list what I'm enjoying doing at the moment, or a holiday I'm looking forward to. And I keep a list, and every now and then I update the list. And it felt so silly in the beginning when I did this, because I thought, okay, I mean, come on, you can think of all those things, right? But I felt that once I started keeping that list of things I'm doing or passionate about, or a holiday that I went to, or a weekend, then it started to be more top of mind in conversations. And when people ask me, hey, how are you doing? How was the weekend? Or how was the last month been? I was not blanked. and normally I was often, yeah, I think I'm good, but nothing came to mind. So I like that you shared that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So I'm making a list. So we talked about collaborating with the business, with stakeholders. How do you have any advice to have better collaboration with your team? For example, other data scientists also might be busy in their project. How do you get them engaged in working with you? And if you have if you disagree on something, how do you resolve that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very valuable to understand, at least on a basic level, from the people in your team, what they find important. So what type of character they have, what they find important, what drives them. Because they're drivers internally in their head, in their body, I don't know how you want to say it, that determines how they will make decisions, and to which extent they will disagree or try to negotiate or fight in a professional way. So all those things, if you know about that, if I know you have a very important project that you're working on and you're dedicating all your time and you don't want to, spend more time, this is also information I can use in the way I communicate with you. So, for example, if you're very busy, and that's all pieces of data, right? I think that's the way I like to see things. Everything in data, even personal relationships, because in your team you have a lot of different personalities. Every person has a lot of data, a lot of history, a lot of preferences. And if I collect data about you mentally, if I know about you, that you have a podcast and that you have this one project that you're very passionate about and you want to make it work, and I still have a ask for your help, even though I know you're fully booked, I may ask a bit kinder, right? Or I may say, I know you're working on this project and I know it's taking a lot of your time, and I would like to ask if we have, maybe in 2 weeks, maybe we can spend 15 minutes on this. I know you're busy, but maybe it's something you can consider. Instead of saying, hey, let's do this, let's be very blunt. So in that way, you can adjust your communication. If you know what's important for you, if this project is important for you, for your because you get a lot of satisfaction from it, because you want to use it to make a promotion, whatever the driver is, right? And by understanding everyone's preferences, what they're working on, you can also optimize the collaboration. And also, what type of programming language they're into, what type of projects they're passionate about. Because the better you know what people are passionate about and what their skills are, also the better you can judge or estimate what type of people you should ask for what type of tasks. So I think that's also a valuable thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So now let's talk about presentations. Once you finish the project, you're delivering a presentation, and sometimes even though you did a great project, but you didn't deliver a great presentation, people don't trust your work. So what are some tips in giving a good presentation?
Yeah, presentation skills is a big subject. And the biggest mistake of data scientists that I've seen is giving too much detail and going into the technical details while the business side is not interested in that. So the business is only interested, or mostly interested, in what will it do for them and how will it help solve their problems. That's why it's so important to understand what's the purpose, what are their goals, their individual goals, the goals of the team, what are they trying to achieve. Because if you know they're all about decreasing risk, then if your model is about increasing revenue, maybe it's not a very good solution. So understanding what matters to them, not giving too much technical details, and also use storytelling. And many people see data visualization as storytelling, but I disagree, because just a graph is not a story. Maybe it can be a story, it can be part of a story, but it's not just a story. You also need a narrative. And a narrative is a set of words that make a story. So what another tendency of many data scientists, and I think many technical people, they frame a story in the way that it's and. It's just information pasted behind each other. So here's some data, and here's some data, and here's some more data. But it's not a very interesting narrative. So to look at it from a different perspective, let's take a very concrete example. So imagine if I went on a holiday to Italy, and you ask me, hey, how was your holiday in Italy? And I tell, yeah, it was good. We had some wine, we had good food, and we drove around the country. Yeah, all right, pretty okay. Not very interesting story.
Yeah.
And what's missing here is the tension, the problem, and the but. The word but includes some tension, right? We say also, if you give a compliment and you say but after, it's not a very good idea. But that's a different topic. That's a different topic. So the and framework is not very compelling if you say and. An alternative for the holiday in Italy story is, okay, we had good food and good wine, but on the third day we got a flat tire. And that's why we needed to walk 10 kilometers or 10 miles even to get a new spare tire. Therefore, the next time when I rent a new car, I'll check if there's a spare tire in the back. It's not a great story, but you see it as it's a really different feeling to it. We can apply the same to data stories. So if instead of saying, here's some data, here's some data, here's some data, or here's the model, here's what we do next, and here's what we do next. You can also introduce the setting, saying, hey, this was what you asked, and these were the parameters we looked at. But in this model, we also found one compelling insight, namely it's this one. Therefore, the next actions, we recommend to do X, Y, Z. So instead of and, use the and, but, therefore framework. And it doesn't need to have, the words and, but, therefore, but the kind of power or the feeling they have, that needs to be included. So first start with agreement. So and, something people know about already, or they confirm. they kind of say, yes, that's what I understand. That's the kind of the baseline. Then, but it's the turn. Okay, now it becomes interesting. I'm on holiday, sitting in on a terrace, but then we found a dead body. Now it becomes interesting, right? And therefore, is kind of the next steps, the lesson, and what we should do next.
Yeah. I really like the framework. I think in other storytelling framework I have read is you start off, if you think about like a Disney, I think there's something like a Disney framework, right? Disney movie.
Yeah.
You started off a normal day, and then there's some challenges or something bad happened. So there's a challenge, and in order for the story to continue, you need to tackle the challenge. And there is a climax when you achieve their success, you kill the monster or something like that. And then in the end, you have this happy ending. I think to put this framework into a data science problem, you can, for the challenge to sounds interesting, you can talk about some challenge you faced in for example, in data, right? Maybe some data quality, maybe exploration, or maybe the initial model doesn't work. I think even more interesting challenge to tell the story is to talk about the challenge in the business that comes back to the goal of this analysis, right? Without this analysis, what are some missing opportunities, or what is the risk if you don't do this analysis? So business come to you for a reason. Usually they are facing the challenge. So another thing is you can also work with the business to understand how they're solving the problem today. What is the challenge? And how did you use data, your model, to help them resolve the challenge and achieve this happy ending?
Exactly. Yeah, I like that addition, and it all follows this structure, right? Where you start somewhere, and then the tension is rising, and then the tension is falling. That's what all the Disney movies follow. Even Lion King, for example, exactly the same story. So they have some setup where Simba is shown, okay, this is what it means to be a king. Then there are some fights. The Mustafa, the father, dies, and then they have a fight with Scar, and eventually Simba becomes the king. That's kind of the new world. And I think to make it even more interesting, because I like what you're saying, and to build on that is to add characters to the story. And you can use Simba, but maybe it's better to use a different character. And the best type of characters you can use in a data story is a character that people can relate to. People in the audience, the people that are listening, can relate to and care about. So if it's a marketeer in front of you, a group of marketeers, then include customers. If it's HR, talk about employees. And then you can talk about this frustration that the customers have, right? So maybe there's a part of the website is not working, and they're very frustrated, and therefore they go to a competitor. But introducing this new predictive model, you can understand their behavior better and thereby solve the problem. And so that the customer is not leaving to the competitor, but going to or staying with us, with the company, and staying like a loyal customer forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And what are some other advice you have about giving the presentation besides the storytelling part?
Yeah, so when it comes to presenting in general, I think there are a few things very important. In the presentation, you need to be focused and confident and relaxed. So you need to be a lot of things, to deliver a good presentation, and it's not easy. So it's important to find what works for you. Some people, how you prepare. So in the last 30 minutes before a presentation, you need to have kind of a ritual, or you need to know what works for you. Some people like to talk to people. Some people like to be alone. Some people like to do 50 push-ups, or you meditate, or it doesn't matter, right? If at least find what works for you to calm your nerves if you tend to be nervous. And I think we're all nervous. It depends on the size of the audience, but I think everyone is nervous for some presentations. So how to calm down your nerves? what is really valuable is to get feedback and also to practice, not just in front of, not just for yourself, but try to record yourself and see how you speak, not just how you stand there and what gestures you use, but also the intonation of your voice. It's very hard to listen to yourself if you're not recording yourself. And recording yourself is pretty difficult, right? Because you need to look at yourself. It can be cringeworthy if you look at yourself and you see all these things that you normally don't notice. But I don't think they're more valuable things than recording yourself when it comes down to public speaking, because you can see everything, what's happening. So that's a very important one too. And a last tip on voice, it's very important that many people have a tendency to use up talk. So to go up at the end of the sentence, like I'm doing now. And if I speak like this, it sounds like I'm not sure of what I'm saying because everything sounds like a question. Yeah. And especially when people are nervous, they tend to do that. So and it's a big difference, right? I can say like it was an increase of 20%, or it's an increase of 20%. And you can feel the difference, right? It's a big difference. So I think this is also something to look out for.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's a lot of like details, right? And also when we're nervous, sometimes we talk really fast. I know I have that problem. So I think to remind yourself to breathe, to slow down, lower your voice.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes, and there are so many details, like you said. And I think it's also important to realize that you need to improve one by one, right? Not try everything out, especially for a big presentation. Try not to improve everything at once. Try to work on one thing and ask some feedback from a colleague who you trust, maybe another data scientist or someone else you trust, to get some feedback, to have an honest conversation, because those conversations, help so much. They reveal what's the impression of other people when you speak and when you present. So also ask feedback from the business, because they also have a bit different perspective. Maybe the data scientist said, hey, it was a great presentation. Maybe the business person said, it was not very useful.
Yeah.
And then okay, maybe the way I articulate my findings needs to be more in line with what they're expecting. So more about the business value.
Right. You need to know your audience and cater your presentation to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk a lot about the communication skills and soft skills. What are some common misconceptions people have around being a good communicator?
Around being a good communicator. Yeah, I think the biggest misconception about being a good communicator is that it's a natural talent. Because I think it's an assumption that many people make, that if you're good at communicating, then you have always been like that. And I think it's bullshit. Because, I mean, you can have a talent for being a good communicator, a good presenter, and you can also have a talent for coding, for football, for whatever. But it's a skill, just like the other skills I just mentioned. And you can improve, and everyone can improve, and everyone can become a decent communicator. Not everyone will be the best TEDx speaker, right? But you also don't need to be that level. But you do need to get at a certain level to be a successful data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also a misconception about soft skills or communication skills is that they're less important, or it's mostly about the coding, mostly about doing the analysis, creating a model. But in fact, if you do all that work, but you cannot tell what you have done in words that other people understand, your impact is very limited. So that's another misconception. And I think hard skills, so coding, mathematics, statistics, always need to go hand in hand with communication skills, and you need to work on both of them.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Would you agree?
So, yes, I agree with that. I think communication skills is something we can develop. And to communicate doesn't mean you have to say a lot of things. And on the contrary, sometimes you need to say less and listen more. And do you have any advice on how to be a good listener?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I like that you bring this up, because many introverts think, okay, I'm not a good communicator because I'm not good at speaking. I think many introverts are fantastic communicators because they have the ability to listen. They are curious and they ask questions. And that's half of the work, right? Or maybe 80% if you ask me. Because many people, they are too eager to talk and they don't really listen or look at other people. But if you're an introvert and you ask questions and you're curious, that's already a big step. And how to be a better listener, I think it's a difficult skill to develop because most of us overestimate how good we are at listening. It's a Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's true especially for listening. We overestimate how good we're at driving, but also I think it holds for listening. And I think it comes down to calming your mind, first of all. So if we're speaking right now and I'm thinking about my deadline of Monday, then I cannot really have a good conversation. I cannot really listen to you. So you need to try and calm your mind, especially for big meetings or important conversations. Try to relax, just like for a big presentation. And then really do this. You can also do an exercise with a colleague where you're only allowed to ask questions for 2 minutes. So not giving your own opinion, advice, but only ask questions. And for many people, it's quite difficult because they're not used to it. So this is also an exercise you can do. You're only allowed to ask questions, not add your own opinion. And it comes down to not only listening to the words, but also what they mean, and get very curious about that. So if you have the curiosity that you have when you dive into the data, try to apply that curiosity to people and understand what's driving them, what they're interested in, with their preferences, and how they see the world. I think then listening becomes pretty easy.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And previously you mentioned be confident during the presentation. How do you develop that confidence? Especially during the presentation, people will challenge you. There will never be a perfect model, and people will give you their feedback, their suggestions, how they would approach it. And how do you maintain your confidence, your calm?
Yeah, that's not always easy. And one thing that can help is to realize that if people attack your model or your work, don't take it personally. It's not that they say that you're a bad worker or a bad person or anything like that. They're just attacking the work, or they want to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
So that's an important one, and focus on the reason behind it. Well, what are they trying to achieve? It comes down. We come a lot back to what's the purpose, right? What's behind their reasoning? What's behind their pushback? But that's in the end what it comes down to. If you understand that part, you will have the key to success in hand. And also, if people see that you care about their issues or what they don't like about your model, then they see you as a partner instead of the person that is trying to push a model on them. So becoming that business partner and co-create something instead of being in silos and saying, hey, this is what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point.
And also one more thing about communication, about presentations. Toastmasters is a great place to go. I'm not sure if you know, but it's a public speaking club. It's all over the world, and it's a place where people go that want to improve public speaking. Some of the people are very at the beginning of the level. Some people are professional speakers. So most clubs have a lot of difference in level, but it's a very encouraging environment. And the idea is that every evening, so every 2 weeks or every week or every month, there will be a meeting where a few people will do a speech, so a presentation about a topic. Then other people give feedback, and it's very encouraging. And this way you can try out a lot of presentation styles and get more confident with your presentations. It's also something I did, and it really helped me to understand what I should work on, what I'm maybe better at, to see how other people are speaking. And this gave me a lot of confidence in presenting, and also when people were challenging what I was saying.
Yeah, are you talking about Toastmasters?
Toastmasters, yes.
Yeah, so that's how I met another guest I interviewed, Dan Lee.
Oh, really?
In the same Toastmaster group, but I haven't developed a speech, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So that's a great advice. And also during the presentation or in meetings, sometimes they ask a question and we don't know, or we are just not certain about the outcome of the model. So how do you communicate that uncertainty while maintain trust connection with your stakeholders?
Yeah, it comes down to be very transparent with that this uncertainty is there, and to see to which extent that uncertainty is a problem for the other person. So that's something I would do to understand, because sometimes the uncertainty is not a problem. So I would definitely be open and transparent about it. You can also share that what the things you have done to make sure this is the best kind of approach or best solution that you found. If you take them on a journey and explain, hey, these are the few things we have tried. I would not talk too much about the approach, because usually the business is less interested in that. But sometimes you need it. You need to kind of share, get them on a journey and say, hey, these are the solutions we tried and this is really the best. I know it's still uncertain and it's maybe not what you want exactly, but what do you think? So ask a question and see how they respond. And then you have a conversation about how they feel about it. But if you only say, okay, this is the solution, but it's very uncertain, then maybe other people get the feeling, there should be another way, right? And then the conversation becomes a bit tense. How would you approach such a situation?
I agree with you. I think being transparent, if I need more time to finish a task, I think it's always good to tell them in advance, not like the last minute. Or if you don't know something, tell them what you don't know. And then I think we talked about before, sometimes we have the tendency to want to impress people. So we might over promise the results. Oh, I'll get this done in 2 days. I think there will be some outcome from analysis. So I would say don't over promise and set a right expectation. It's always to finish your work sooner. So, you can, if you look at the data or you haven't got the chance to look at the data, just educate the stakeholder. I think part of our job is sometimes is a teacher. I need time to collect the data. Those are some challenges in the modeling phase, in production, and I might need more time. So to communicate, also in general, let the business understand that sometimes there might be, the model might not discover anything. It could be useless. There's a little bit of a risk. And then plan a option B before you dive into this process. So people are prepared, understand this risk. And I think it's difficult because we are afraid that people will abandon the data science project when we communicate that type of risk. I think if you take the time to let people know what is opportunity in investing in this data science project, right? And you might lose certain opportunities in discovery a new business if you don't invest. So although this might not come to any results, it's good to investigate that. And also maybe you have a team, you and your coworker can take on different approaches. So maybe their approach will have some good outcome or have something very simple. If the more complex one, doesn't yield results. I think you can strategize with the business and see your data science project as an investment portfolio, right? There's this placing different bets, and this come back into playing poker, right?
Yeah.
So I want to get your thoughts on this. How do you pick projects? How do you balance your data science portfolio?
Yeah, I love that question, and I love the way you relate it to poker. And I think that there's a great book, Thinking in Bets, by Annie Duke. She's a former professional poker player. And this is how she sees the world and business as well. Everything is a bet. And like you mentioned, all the data science projects are also bets. And that's something that many business stakeholders find difficult, because you don't really know what's going to be the outcome, right? Up front, you need to decide, okay, this amount of money we're going to attribute, this so many weeks data scientists will work on this, but we don't really know the outcome. And it's all about probabilities and estimated outcomes. And if you multiply those, you have the expected value. And that's also how you can kind of approach these kind of subjects. And by understanding how much the business thinks this is worth or will deliver, this will also help to decide what data science projects will help. I think it's a very good approach. And this is also how you build trust with the business.
Yeah, I recommend that book, and it's a good thinking framework, right? Because a lot of times we have our bias. You always want your home team to win. You want your own project to work. But if you think about, would I bet $1,000 on this? Maybe that would change your perspective.
Yeah, and we're all very biased, and becoming aware of our own biases and other people's biases, will help a lot in thinking and data science work.
Yeah. So I think it's a good segue to talk more about behavior science, decision making, and emotional intelligence. So can you tell us from your perspective, what is behavioral science?
Yeah, behavioral science is the science of behavior. So analyzing psychology and understanding what are all our motivations, our drivers, and how we relate to each other as well. And the reason why it's so important in data science is because data science is not a domain which works in isolation, right? Some of the technical jobs, they work more by themselves. They don't have so much contact with clients or with business stakeholders. But data scientists, they usually have more contact with the business. They're more closer to the business, or they should be. And that's why they also need to understand what's driving the business, what psychology do they have, what is their way of thinking. While we, data people, think in a more analytical way, other people are more driven by emotions. And this is also something I talk a lot about in my book, where we make a lot of decisions every day, and we tend to think that we make choices in a pretty rational way, but it's really not true. And research shows this, that 90% of our decisions, or even more, are driven mainly by emotions. And in my book, I talk about these two systems in the brain, how we make decisions, where one system is the quick one, the more emotional driven, and the other one is more slower, but more thoughtful and rational. And most of our decisions are driven by this emotional brain, this quick brain, what takes shortcuts. And I also talk about this metaphor of the emotional brain being the elephant and the rational brain being the person on top. And even though the person on top, the rational brain knows, hey, we need to go right because that's the best decision. The elephant, if the elephant sees a candy on the left, then he will go left, right? And the elephant is much heavier and much more powerful than the person on top. And this is something we need to understand, that everyone is driven by emotions, and we all have our biases. And you can put all the data on the table, all the rational facts, but there's a big chance that people will not be convinced, because eventually people are convinced when they're moved emotionally. And when you're presenting and talking with stakeholders, this is so important to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you have an advice on overcoming our own biases?
It comes down to becoming more self-aware and aware of those biases. And I think it's very difficult to do that by yourself. Journaling is a good way to do it, because if you journal, if you write down your thoughts every day or every week about what you're doing, what you're thinking, then you can also look back at that. That's what I've done for the last 6 years or so. Regular journaling. So a few times a week, I write down in a digital journal called Day One. It's free and it's a great app. It's really simple, and it allows you to write down your thoughts, or what you have done, your struggles, what you're worried about. And the beauty of that is that you automatically see, if I write today, so right now, today, as we're recording, is the 4th of February. So I immediately get a view on what I was thinking on the 4th of February 1 year ago and 5 years ago. And this showed me, my flaws in thinking and how I changed in thinking. So you can do it. Journaling is one way, but it's difficult to do it by yourself. a good way is to get other people's perspective and also get feedback from them, how they see you, how they perceive you. And maybe you think in a meeting you were really right. But if 3 other people say, maybe there's another approach or another way of thinking, maybe your solution is not the only one, then this gives you some information and maybe you have a bias.
Yeah. I think that's a great advice, to be more self-aware and ask questions. Sometimes ask questions like, do I have this reaction because my ego, I want to be right, or I'm doing this to achieve a purpose for this specific goal. And a lot of times it's because I want to be right. And one example is, sometimes people disagree with me under the LinkedIn post, but sometimes it's really obvious. I already mentioned that in a post. So sometimes I have this kind of anger, really want to jump on, tell, hey, you're wrong. Did you read my post? And then I was like, okay, what's the point? Do I just want to be right to prove they're wrong, or I want to convey a message? And then I realized, okay, the message is there. I don't always have to go disagree with, but sometimes it's hard. So I think also, it's okay to be a human, allow your emotions to flow out there, but it's also important to just have that awareness. Even if you are going to make this decision based on emotion, just know that, okay, this is a decision I made based on emotion, and be aware of the consequences.
Exactly. And I like how you described that that you're able, and that requires quite a pretty high degree of self-awareness, to be able to look at your own thoughts or your own emotions in the moment, right? In that moment when you read a comment, you feel the tension rising, or you say, so you can kind of hear what you're telling yourself. And then you can make a different response, right? Instead of becoming angry and responding, you can take a step back and say, okay, it's fine. I let it be there, but I'm going to do something different.
Yeah. So could you share some decision models or useful mindset you learned from poker?
The biggest one is not to be attached to the outcome, because many times in poker, so imagine, I'm not sure how much you know about poker, but imagine if you're on the turn, so not the last card, but the card before, and you're making a very big bet because you have a good hand, right? You have 3 of a kind. Imagine 3 of a kind. And you place a big bet and the other person calls. And then the cards open. Maybe you go all in. The cards open and the other person has 1 pair. But then on the last card, something happens and they get a flush, for example. So they beat you while you were ahead by a lot. So then you can become very angry, right? Oh, they're so unlucky. How can he call with such cards? And angry at the cards or angry at the person. But there's no purpose. It doesn't get you anywhere. So you need to think that, okay, I made the right decision with the information I had at that moment. I made the right decision. So I need to be happy, or I can be happy. I can be happy with the decision I made. And there are a lot of decisions in our life that we might regret, or we think in a meeting, oh shit, I should have said this, or I should have said that, because then it would be a better outcome. But we need to be a bit more gentle with ourselves, I think. I think we're very critical of ourselves, and thinking what we could have done differently. But with the mindset of, at that moment I had that information and I made my decision, and it's now over. So that's something I learned from poker.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's very difficult to detach the process from the results.
It's very difficult. And I like that you asked this question because I never thought about it this way. But I think it's the biggest lesson of decision making, or lesson I took from poker in this way. So thank you for bringing that up.
And previously you mentioned emotional questions, big decisions in your career. So now let me ask you, what is some big decision you made in your career?
Yeah, definitely to quit my job. But actually, the question to quit my job was not, or the decision to quit my job didn't feel like such a big decision anymore, because I made all these decisions in the past that brought me to that moment. And then it was just the next step. And quitting my job felt, for many people, they said, "Wow, this is a big thing, and congratulations, it's so much fun." And for me, it didn't really feel like a big thing because in my head, I made the decision way before, and so many decisions I made at the same time. One really good decision was to start writing online, because this helped me to realize what I am passionate about, because automatically you will write about things you're more passionate about. So it discovers something about myself, what I like, what I'm passionate about. And also to help me to improve my writing, to improve how I communicate. And at the same time, it helped me to build an audience and build a business. So this is a big decision as well. And LinkedIn contributed to that a lot. I mean, I'm very happy and lucky to be in a position where I don't need to, call companies and stalk them with questions and messages about, please buy my training program for your data scientist, because always people reach out to me, and that I would never be in that position if I would not have decided to write online and to post on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so during your training, what are some common mistakes you observed from your students?
There are quite a few that I try to tackle in the training. First of all, I'll tell you about the different topics. So business understanding is about understanding the business, and what a common mistake is not to ask enough questions and to jump into the data and to go into problem solving without understanding the purpose. Second topic is about buy-in. Some things we talked about. So how do you get their buy-in? How do you keep connected and ask their feedback? And how do you persuade them? And persuasion is more about the emotional part than giving more data. And we look a lot at neuroscience and how our brain works. And a common mistake is to think that people think in a rational way. If you give them the data, they will accept it or they will change. But usually that doesn't really happen. And about data storytelling, is a mistake I see is to give too many details, and not really understand what the data means for them. How it will change their life, or how it will contribute to their job, making it easier or faster or smarter. So having this empathy and understanding what matters to the other person is the foundation of that. And so those are some of the mistakes I often see. And what I think is very important is that I show that I'm not perfect, right? I learned a lot, but still I'm not perfect. I'm always learning. And communication skills is a sensitive topic for some people in data science. It's out of the comfort zone. It's different than coding. So it needs to be a very safe environment that people need to be at ease to also practice and try out and do a case or maybe an exercise where I'm the business guy, and you need to talk with me, and I give some pushback and see how you respond. So those things I also try to help people become more comfortable and get the skills to communicate their data in a way that is relatable to the real world, but still a safe environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And also, it's kind of serves as a good review for the topics we discussed earlier. What are some frequent asked questions during the training?
Yeah, many questions are like you ask, how do you deal with when a stakeholder pushes back? Or what do you do when someone says, well, I need it anyway, even though the problem, or even though there's no solution? So and what many people see in the training is that almost every data scientist experiences the same kind of challenges, and this every time it cracks me up, because people see it and they feel so much better because they feel like, okay, I'm not alone, right? Everyone is challenged by these things, and everyone finds it difficult, and it's okay to be maybe a bit embarrassed or insecure or have all those feelings, because it's not easy. The coding is, that's how I see it. The coding is easy. Numbers are easy, but people are very difficult. People are so complex. So that's why this is so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Also make me feel better. So now, what is something you're excited about in your life and in your career?
I'm excited that I can help other people. One of my biggest drivers. What motivates me in life is contributing to the lives of other people. And I'm so happy that I'm in a position to be able to do that. So through my book or training or through the course I create, that I can do that. And it makes me full of joy if I read a message from someone that says, hey, I read your book or I took your training and this is what I do differently, or this is how I think differently, or I had a conversation with my manager or with my girlfriend. That's to me the biggest purpose in life. So that's what makes me very passionate. And also what I'm passionate about is that I have the time right now, or I don't have the corporate meetings sometimes that I don't want to be in, but time also for myself to think more, to think about, something I'm creating, or to write, or to create new training modules. And I need a lot of time for myself. And now I also have that. And that's also something I'm passionate about. And the last thing I will mention is that I'm also passionate about meeting new people and building new connections, just like we're doing right now, right? It's almost evening for me. You just woke up and we're having this conversation. And I think it's something magical. And I'm very passionate about, meeting all these people around the world and having conversations about work or about life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very exciting. And for people who want to follow you and learn more from you, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, best place is on LinkedIn. So I dare you to try and spell my last name. So it's my name is Gilbert Eijkelenboom. If you look for Mind Speaking, you might find me as well. You can also have a look on my website, mindspeaking.com. I also offer a free self-assessment. It takes you 5 minutes. It's 35 questions. And you as a data scientist will answer those questions. And the result will be that you get a report of your different skills, communication skills, with a PDF with the results and some tips for improvement. So if you're interested in that, you can go find it on the website. And my book, People Skills for Analytical Thinkers, is available on Amazon.
Yeah, I probably have butchered your last name when I introduced you. So search Gilbert Mindspeak on LinkedIn or on the internet and then check out his book. And I have his book myself, and it's a great one. I learned a lot from him. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm very excited to reading more from your trainings, engaging with you on LinkedIn, and I hope we can chat again sometime soon.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot for the questions. You made me think, and I think there are a lot of questions that people can borrow and use in their own conversation. So thanks a lot for today.
Thank you.